I was asked by several people in the redress movement to get involved, but at that time I felt a little bit uncomfortable because I was a working journalist at one of the newspapers. However, after thinking about it for a little while and thinking about what this meant to my community, the Chinese Canadian community, and considering what my grandfathers would think about me if I did not get involved, I thought for a long time about my grandfathers, and I decided that if I did nothing and stood by the wayside and watched it all happen, they would be deeply ashamed of me. I looked at what they needed, and I decided very early on that they needed somebody to help them create a media strategy. There's an interesting relationship between the two presses, in that you have your ethnocultural press and your mainstream press, and while they would seem to be separate from each other, they operate very closely to each other, in that if the mainstream covers something, the ethnocultural press will cover it as well. It doesn't go so much the other way around, where if the ethnocultural press covers something, that the media, the mainstream media, or the so-called mainstream media would cover it. I identified this as a problem, and I quickly stepped in to try to rectify that by creating media messaging around these events and putting it into the context as to why regular Canadians, a regular Canadian audience, would be concerned with what was going on. I took it upon myself to create a nationally based media list that I could share with everybody across Canada that was interested in this matter. What it took was actually sitting down at the Toronto Metro Reference Library for about 6 days, going through the media directories for Canada and writing out emails and things for various people in the media, and then actually calling them to see if they were still in those jobs, in those positions, so that we could have an effective media list. Back, I think it was November 24th, 2005, when the Tories launched a no-confidence motion against Prime Minister Paul Martin's government. And that changed things for the redress movement, because now it was almost like the perfect storm for us. There were several so-called swing ridings where the vote could go either way, and having the ethnic vote, or the so-called ethnic vote, present in those ridings could sway could sway the way that the election went within those federal ridings. And we found, I believe it was over 20 ridings that had more than 8% Chinese Canadian population within those ridings. That can really make a difference in an election, in any election. By bringing about this sort of analysis to the election campaign and reinforcing the strength of the ethnic vote, so thereby linking our issue with a broader issue within the election, we were able to further amplify our voice, to find even more relevance to the future of Canada. I think that we had a resounding success, because within the federal Liberal Party, we had two people on the West Coast, Ujjal Dosanjh and David Emerson, actually go against their own party's standard position on redress. The position at that time was no apology, no compensation. The work that I put in, and that I put in a team effort with many, many other people across the country, is something that makes me feel really, really good. I feel really good as a Chinese Canadian, but also because this is the sort of effort that we can take pride in as Canadians in general. I also have to say that this is one of the most Canadianizing experiences that anybody can ever get into, that when you have an issue in your community and you stand up to fight for that issue, I think it reinforces our identity as Canadians. Canada has to be more introspective about its own history. We have to appreciate the fact that other groups, apart from European Canadians, have actually played a very, very strong and long-lasting role in building this country.